Hi, today we will guide you through our setup for the assassin that rapidly triggers any cold spell using cast on crit. This build is focused mainly on triggering Ice Nova and Frostbolt with Cyclone via cast on crit setup. The Ice Nova of Frostbolts can trigger from 4 Frostbolt projectiles each time it is used. You can hit the same enemy with all those Novas, making it a very competitive skill for clear speed and boss damage. This build can be played with any cold spell to your liking, but the Ice Nova seems to have the best performance. The COC's Malice is a very useful sword that automates your Frostbolts, which is an important aspect that allows this build to reach absurd amounts of damage. With cast on crit, you don't need any cast speed, but you have to balance your attack speed properly. You should focus on getting a 100% chance to critically strike with your Cyclone first. With the awakened version of this support, it is almost impossible to go over the attack speed limit accidentally. The build can be played as a life-based and energy shield variant. The life version is simpler and stronger at a low budget, but energy shield becomes supreme as you obtain better items. It can obtain more maximum energy shield than the life version could, and it is easier to gain stun immunity and chaos resistances. Being on low life also enables the Pain Attunement Keystone for more damage. If you have at least a 14% increased cooldown recovery rate on your gear, you will need just a bit under the 7.5 attacks per second on your Cyclone. Exceeding this number will result in empty hits that can't trigger the Ice Nova yet. The main defense of this build is freezing enemies in place and a decent amount of energy shield and evasion. Even a little bit of instant leech provides a great recovery thanks to the very high hit rate of your spells. This setup has excellent clear speed thanks to great area coverage and high movement speed. The single target damage is also great thanks to the powerful shotgunning effect of your Ice Novas. For the basic, the only required item in this build is COC's Malice, but to push your damage and survivability via additional auras, you will need the Chevron Wrappings armor that allows you to safely reserve all your life away. Most unique items used in this build are rather cheap, but you can aim for certain corrupted implicit that will greatly increase their power as well as their price. The only requirement here is the COC's Malice sword, but if you want to reserve your life, you will also need the Chevron's Wrappings and Prism Guardian. COC's Malice is the mandatory item for this build. Try to get the highest attack speed and flat cold damage to spells as possible. It is used to automate Frostbolt setup. You can corrupt it to gain even more attack speed or penetrate elemental resistance. Use this shield so that you can use an additional 3 auras at the cost of your life. The build is energy shield focused, so that won't be an issue. If you have enough resistances, you can get one that redirects a portion of the physical damage to be taken as elemental via additional corruption. Chevron's Wrappings is a necessary item to reserve your life without the worry about chaos damage. You should get one with +2 levels to socketed AoE gems and link it using tainted currency. Doing so will make coloring sockets easier, as the usual intelligence requirement is not favorable for our support gems. You won't need your life as it's an energy shield build. This amulet suits such builds the best. It increases your energy shield, attributes, chaos resistance, and grants stun immunity. You can use catalysts to boost either chaos resistance or life conversion. The Crown of the Inward Eye improves your energy shield and life, and your bonuses to mana and energy shield are applied to your spell damage at 30% effectiveness. Try to get a corrupted version with an additional power charge. If you want to level up using a life-based version, you can use this armor to get lots of area damage and radius. It also can be corrupted for +2 gem levels, but remember that it is only a temporary replacement. The Militant Faith Jewel allows you to benefit from Inner Conviction that greatly boosts your spell damage for each active power charge you have. Transform the Agnostic Keystone on the left side of the skill tree. You can still use Frenzy charges if you have sources of minimum charges. The Circle of Fear is a very strong ring to boost your damage, but it is worth giving up on the rare ring only if you get a very good synthesis implicit here, for example Onslaught on hit or reduced mana costs. Use the Thread of Hope jewel with a large ring and put it next to Instability so that you can allocate Heart of Ice, Arcane Focus, Essence Surge, and Blast Radius. The penalty for your resistance can make the gearing process much harder, so don't rush this jewel. You can use the pure talent jewel if you severely lack the critical strike chance on your cyclone. It can be very useful at the beginning but should be replaced by a proper jewel rather soon. It is also a good target to get useful corruptions like reservation efficiency or corrupting blood immunity. The Watcher's Eye is a very good jewel that grants you bonuses based on the auras you use. In this build we use many auras, so you should look for at least 2 useful modifiers, but 3 of them should be approachable too. You can use those jewels to borrow 1 notable from any shadow ascendancy. The best candidates for that are Soul Drinker, Polymath, Ambush and Assassinate, or Born in the Shadows. They can be rather expensive, so make sure a pair of rare jewels wouldn't be better for your character. On your rare gear you will need a lot of elemental resistances, attributes, and accuracy ratings just to get started. To improve your damage you will also need critical strike chance and multiplier, spell damage, cooldown recovery rate, and attack speed. The life variant will require you to have maximum life bonuses. The low life version requires a high energy shield and mana regeneration instead. Movement speed, energy shield, elemental resistances, and dexterity are commonly found here. You can easily obtain a bit of cooldown recovery rate using Eldritch Implicits, or use Crusader or Shaper influence to gain higher values of that modifier. You can also use the Eldritch Implicit that drops the Brittle Ground, which adds a flat 2% to your critical strike chance. On your gloves you can find many powerful offensive modifiers that increase your damage under certain conditions. Those should also provide you with a high amount of attack speed, accuracy rating, resistance, and energy shield. With Eldritch Implicits you can inflict unnerve and cold exposure. Stygian Vice grants Abyss Socket and allows you to use 1 more jewel, while Crystal Belt grants more energy shield. You can craft up to 12% cooldown recovery rate on any belt using a crafting bench. Going over 14% total cooldown recovery rate has no effect until you reach the 52% threshold. You will need at least 1 corrupted jewel with 2% reservation efficiency, and Abyss jewels are usually the best to sacrifice. You can get a bit of energy shield or maximum life, a critical strike multiplier, lacking resistances and attributes, or attack speed here. It can also provide a little bit of cooldown recovery rate. There are many valuable modifiers obtainable on your ring. You can get missing attributes, resistances, accuracy rating, critical strike chance and multiplier, as well as some energy shield or minimum frenzy and endurance charges. It should have 1 open prefix so you add mana cost reduction with your crafting bench. All jewels should provide extra energy shield and at least 1 critical strike multiplier amplification mod. You can also get an accuracy rating, missing resistances and attributes, bleed avoidance, or spell damage. The mana reservation efficiency doesn't affect the auras you reserve with your life, but you can get global reservation efficiency via corruption. Get yourself a couple of cold-related or general elemental damage notables on a jewel with 8 passives. The Blast Freeze is very useful notable for improving your survivability during mapping. The Blanketed Snow provides the most damage, but the difference is not worth overspending your budget. On your medium clusters with a maximum of 5 additional passives you should prioritize critical strike chance, damage, and area of effect. The Quick Getaway reliably improves your movement speed and attack speed, which are vital for smooth gameplay. The Taste of Hate is a very good and relatively cheap defensive flask that reduces the physical and cold damage you take during its effect. Freeze avoidance can be useful if you don't use the Purity of Elements. The Bottled Faith keeps the title of one of the best and most versatile flasks for all builds to improve your damage, especially for the ones that rely on critical strikes. The damage amplification applies only to enemies standing inside the consecrated ground. For the remaining magic flasks we recommend using a Diamond Flask with critical strike bonus, Quicksilver Flask with movement speed bonus, and the Jade Flask with evasion rating bonus. You can also craft the mana cost reduction bonus on the flask with the highest uptime. The Cyclone is our main trigger skill that will cast all damaging spells used in this build. Remember to add quality to this gem as it lowers the movement speed penalty. Ice Nova of Frostbolts is our main damage-dealing spell. It has great both single target and area coverage. You need the transfigured variant to expand on your Frostbolts for additional damage. The regular one is not as impressive. If you have trouble getting the right socket colors, you can use the suboptimal gems like Power Charge on critical or increased critical damage supports. The Awakened cast on critical strike paired with Crit Mastery can give you a 31% cooldown recovery rate, but it is definitely not required at the start. You will greatly improve your damage of Ice Novas if you use them on Frostbolts. Use the Cospre Malice to automate this process. You will need to add extra projectiles to the Frostbolts to allow the Ice Nova truly shine. Use the Inspiration to lower the mana costs. You can also use other utility gems like Culling Strike or Leech. The main defensive layer of this build is Evasion, which this aura boosts. It also has many useful possible modifiers from the Watcher's Eye Jewel. Purity of Elements grants elemental resistances and makes you immune to elemental ailments. If you have enough resistance on your gear, you can use Zealotry for more damage. Hatred is a very strong offensive aura that increases cold damage you deal with cold spells. You will need at least 2% global reservation efficiency on your gear to use all three auras. By socketing those auras in the Prism Guardian they will reserve your life instead, but without the usual 200% multiplier from the Arrogant support. You still need a little bit of life reservation efficiency on your gear and passive tree. The Discipline grants a lot of energy shield and makes it faster to recharge. Use the Vol version to make recharge uninterruptible for a short duration. Herald of Ice adds a bit of cold damage and creates ice explosions when you shatter an enemy. Skip this skill if you don't have dual Enlightened supports. Precision improves your accuracy rating and critical strike chance. It reserves a flat amount of mana instead of the usual percentage, based on the gem level. The Enlightened support lowers the mana reservation of linked auras. If you remove the Herald of Ice, you won't need this support in any setup. Clarity is a mandatory aura to boost your mana regeneration rate. You won't trigger Ice Novas if you can't pay their mana cost. Summon Skitterbots create 2 minions that apply Chill and Shock to nearby enemies. You can boost those ailments with support gems, but doing so increases the mana reservation. Thanks to the Bone Chill support, the chill from your Skitterbots also increases your damage. You can boost it further by using the Unbound Ailment support. Doing so grants more damage than the whole Herald of Ice, but it doesn't look as pretty. The Assassin's Mark is the mark that greatly improves your critical strike chance and damage against rare and unique enemies. You can automate it with the mark on hit support. It will reduce the effectiveness of your mark, so you can consider casting it manually on the pinnacle bosses. The Frostbite is a curse that lowers the cold resistance of your opponents and increases the duration of your freezes on them. You will need to anoint Whispers of Doom on your amulet to use it. The Frost Blink is the best movement skill to use in this build since it can be used without interrupting your Cyclone and will deal plenty of damage on its own. We recommend killing all the bandits for 2 additional passive points, but helping Alira for extra critical strike multiplier, elemental resistances, and mana sustain is also a decent option on the lower budget. For your major Pantheon power we recommend using the Soul of Era Kali to reduce the damage over time you take from various sources. The Soul of the Brine King is also good if you lack freeze avoidance, but it should be only a temporary solution. For the minor Pantheon power you should pick and upgrade the Soul of Ralakesh. The energy shield builds are vulnerable to bleeding since a flask mod that removes those effects also drastically reduces the uptime on utility flasks. You should level up using the Ice Novas as a spellcaster. It will save you a lot of trouble and is decently good on its own. You will need most of your final gear equipped to solve all problems to reliably triggering Novas at an optimal rate. The unoptimized life-based version will be good enough to clear easy maps and level up your character. Attempting the low-life version without the required items and passives will drastically slow down your progression. The passive tree is quite simple. The focus here is to pick up all notables related to power charges, as well as the energy shield or life notables on the way. You will also take the nearby aura and critical strike clusters. The accuracy and mark notables are very powerful, but you can skip picking them if you have enough accuracy on your gear. Both of their masteries can grant you 50% more accuracy rating bonus, which will make the early gearing much easier. The mastery that grants 3 levels to your critical strike gems is very important later on. It increases the mana cost reduction from the inspiration and grants tons of cooldown recovery rate from the awakened cast on critical support. As you may have noticed, we didn't include charms from the Affliction League in this guide. We always try to avoid using the borrowed powers in our builds to make them more accessible, and it is easy to simply add free damage bonuses to your character. We hope you will have fun with this setup. If you want to see more of our videos, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Have a good day, and see you next time.